Now some of you might be thinking, why the heck am I reviewing a Disney ride? Is it because Stitch's name is in it? Well, yes, but also no. But mostly yes. Stitch's Great Escape was the first ride I ever went on, and because of that, I have a lot of love and nostalgia for it. And the ride also turns 15 this year, and because they closed the ride on January 6th of this year, it only makes sense I give it a review. It only makes sense I review this ride, because it's not only something different for me to try, but also, Stitch. Okay, so let's do this. First off, a little history on the ride. The ride is based off the Disney classic Lilo and Stitch, which was a big hit for Disney. It was so big that only a few months after its release, it was rumored that Stitch Ride would take over a beloved attraction at Disney's Tomorrowland, which was Alien Encounter. Safe to say, the rumors were true. On October 12, 2003, Alien Encounter was shut down to make way for the new ride Stitch's Great Escape. People thought it was too soon for the characters to come to the park, but they were coming anyways. Fans of the closed ride Alien Encounter were also very upset that the beloved ride, as great as it was getting the shack to a new ride that nobody asked for and was coming to the parks and taking its place. To make matters worse, Stitch's Great Escape had a small budget and only had 1 year to be completed. So instead of making a whole new building, or whatever you do when you make a new ride, they would use some elements from Alien Encounter, like some of the rooms and the original Skippy character. On November 16, 2004, Stitch's Great Escape was open. To celebrate the ride, there was a big blow-up balloon of Stitch, and the castle was covered in toilet paper, and on the castle walls, Stitch wrote Stitch is King. There were also signs saying Stitch was on the loose. For the opening show, Will Smith, Cobra Bubbles, tells everyone that Stitch is on the loose, and if you see him, tell the police at once. The show happened as it normally does, but you can see Stitch going all around the castle. Before the show ends, Stitch and a bunch of Elvis impersonators take on the stage, but then Stitch gets caught, but he escapes. And throughout the day, you can see Stitch around the castle. When you enter the building, you are given a message by the ground councilwoman that you are the new security guard and need to keep an eye on the little monsters until they turn good. When that is done, you go into the pre-show. It is there you see how much they reused from Alien Encounter. The one robot at the desk, the 2 Skippies, and the teleportation tubes. It is also there the robot says his name and what you will be doing. Also his name is...
Introduce myself, I am the Prisoner Teleportation Officer. Sergeant C4703BK2704-90210.
And he says there are 2 types of prisoner levels, level 1 and level 2. We also see that the original Skippy animatronic is in one of the tubes, because of a crime he did. It's then we get the police on the monitor with one of the aliens. After he teleports down, which is a really cool effect by the way, we see the second Skippy animatronic, but this time it is covered in green jelly. Then all of a sudden, Gantu shows up on one of the screens saying that there's a level 3 in the building. Freaking out, the guard passes out and Pleakley tells us to go to the next room. After everyone is sitting down, a countdown starts for the level 3 to be teleported in. After teleporting in, the capsule opens as we finally see our little blue alien in all of his awesome glory. Stitch's 39-inch tall animatronic was always the best part of the show, and it was the most complex at the time. There were also 2 plasma cannons, just like in the movie, and just like the movie, they failed to keep an eye on Stitch. And because of that, the cannons destroy the power and it goes out. You can also hear Stitch talking in the background as he tickles people's heads and jumping on them, thanks to the shoulder thingies. I don't know what they're called. Sorry. Stitch also eats a chili dog and burps a really gross smell. A few minutes later, after the emergency power comes on, Stitch taunts the cannons until they all shut down for good. Stitch gets to the teleporter and he gets out of there, but unlike the movie, he goes to our world and lands in the Magic Kingdom, and we see him riding on the Astral Orbiter. The ride actually had 2 endings. If you ride the ride during the day, Stitch would be on the Astral Orbiter in the day. It was the same if you went during the evening, which was a really cool idea. When you exit the building, you can see a lot of Stitch's cousins on the wall, and then he would walk out and go to a gift shop or something. It was different when I went there. In March 2005, they changed the ride a little bit, but they added more dialogue so people knew what was going on. They also changed the ending this time. In this ending, Stitch landed on Cinderella's castle, saying that a prince was here, and yeah, that was really it. So what do people think of the ride? Well, sad to say, that people hated it. The story made no sense, and it made no sense if it was a part of the movie or not, and it was also an insult to the ride before it. Also, the chili dog made a lot of people nauseous, which I can understand why it did, and there were so many other reasons as well. So yeah, the ride was a bust, and yet it stayed for 14 years. Why? Who knows? As the 2010s rolled around, people were wondering why the ride was still there. Not many people went on it, and Disney stopped caring about the ride. By 2010, it started breaking down mid-show frequently, and some of the speakers had stopped working as well. On October 2nd, 2016, Disney said Stitch's Great Escape would only run seasonally, only open on select days during the busiest times. Disney said the ride would do this all the way to January 6, 2018, and it'd still be in operation after that. But in October that same year, pictures were online and showed the ride and pre-show room were being dismantled. Thus, on January 6, Stitch's Great Escape had its very last showing. Now, I want to say, while this ride isn't for everyone, they were all fans of this ride. How do I know this? Easy. Because of the final showing of Stitch's Great Escape. I found a video on YouTube in the winter time of the beginning of this year. It was a normal video of filming a ride like those awesome people do, and like mostly, the ride went well without any hiccups. But there was something at the end that happened that I wasn't expecting, and that was this.
Release the recruits.
Yes, sir.
I need a vacation.
You report for duty tomorrow. Leave the phones at home. And please, don't feed the prisoners. That is all.
Want to introduce thank you for 14 fabulous leaders of Level 3 and shutting down curriculum. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. It's tomorrow.
I was shocked to see this. I kept rewinding it to make sure I knew what I was watching, and I was so happy. Yes, it did upset me to see the ride go, but all things must come to an end. It was a special moment for me though. The guy said this was the last ride, everyone clapped and cheered. It actually brought tears to me seeing something I loved, that I knew a lot of people hated. And to see this, people clapping and cheering, I knew it wasn't because the ride was out of the parks, it was because they actually cared about it. And that made me so happy. I should say Stitch never left that place though. However, he stayed, and because of that, they made a meet and greet, so if you want to meet the lovable blue alien, you know where to go to. It's also called Stitch's Alien Encounter. Nice nod, Disney. I thought I'd let you know that just because, well, if you were wondering what it was called. Okay, now you're probably wondering, wait, Stitch, why isn't this video over yet? Well, my fine watchers, I'll tell you why. Because Stitch is a big part of my life, and this ride is a very special memory for me, it only makes sense that I give you my history and own thoughts on the ride. With that said, let's go back all the way to 2007. I was 8 at the time. I was watching the new seasons of Thomas, which I didn't know were bad at the time. I had a lot of trains, and I was watching a lot of Lilo and Stitch. I had the first movie on VHS, the same for Stitch the movie. I also had Stitch Has a Glitch on DVD, and I didn't have Leroy and Stitch at the time, but I do now. But as a kid, I would rent it a lot from Blockbuster, and I remember watching the TV series a lot. Anyways, on March break of that year, my family and I, and my dad's mom and dad, or grandma and grandpa, I should say, went to Disney World for the week. It was a great trip. It was one of the best weeks of my life, at the time anyways. I still remember most of the trip like yesterday. On the first day, we went to Magic Kingdom, and we walked around for a bit, taking in all the awesomeness of it all. But somehow, we found ourselves in Tomorrowland, which was the first ride we saw, and that was Stitch's Great Escape. I still remember looking at the ride to this day, the big blue sign with Stitch on it. It looked really cool, but also scary. I should say I got really scared easily when I was a kid, so while looking at it, it looked cool, but I was kind of creeped out at the same time. But my family knew I loved Stitch, and the rest of my family enjoyed him, so most of us went in. But my big brother and my grandpa didn't want to, so they waited outside. When we got to go in, the building was so cool. I thought it was a different world. After watching the video with the ground council woman, we went into the pre-show room, and wow, it was so cool. The robot guy looked nice, and Skippy animatronic looked very cool. All of it was really cool to see. And I understood what was going on, which was a good thing. And man, I loved it when Gantu showed up on the screen. It felt so lifelike. I can't explain it, but it felt like I was really a part of the world. After the pre-show, we went into the main room, and wow, it looked so cool. I still remember walking into the room and sitting down. I still remember how the chairs felt. Yeah, I still remember that. It's insane, I know. However, the sad part was, I was a little too small to feel the shoulder bumpers, so I couldn't feel it when Stitch was supposed to jump on me. Speaking of Stitch, when the countdown was done, which was a little intense, thanks for that, Disney. Anyways, when the tube opened up, and when the smoke cleared, you could see the best part of the ride. I still remember when I first saw Stitch. My god, I was blown away by how realistic he looked, the way he moved, the way he talked. I was 100% convinced I was looking at the actual Stitch, and that I was in the same room with him. It was just amazing. Also, the cannons were awesome too. I still remember how they moved, and some of the dialogue as well. But the rest of the ride, I'm sorry to say, I didn't like. You see, I was afraid of the dark when I was 8, and because of that, when the lights went out, I was scared out of my mind. But I was holding my mom and my grandma's hand, and the dialogue of Stitch calmed me down a bit. And when we got to the ending, I thought it was pretty cool. However, I don't remember any gift shops outside the ride, besides a stand of Toy Story toys, but oh well. Because the dark part of the ride scared me so much, for the rest of the 10 days on our trip, I would ask any ride we went on was like the Stitch one, and I had a nightmare of the ride as well while I was staying there. And if you're wondering, no, I didn't get the chance to meet Stitch. Not because I didn't have the chance to, I did have the chance to meet Stitch, but I was too scared. And no, it wasn't because of the ride. I was still getting used to meeting the characters, and as much as I loved Stitch, I was too scared to meet him face to face. And boy, it is one of the biggest things I regret not doing to this day, but in a few years I'm going back there, and I'll make sure to meet him for sure. However, I did see him at the Disney World Parade at Magic Kingdom, and that was really cool. I saw a few cool Stitch toys, and some other little things, which was cool. Actually, a funny story, my mom and I got some of those Mickey head ice cream thingies, and well, I ate mine, but some of it got on my t-shirt, and well, my mom and dad forgot to bring a spare one, just in case. Regardless, my mom wanted me to get a Disney t-shirt anyways, so we went to one of the Disney stores, and we found what we were looking for pretty quickly, and it had Stitch in the background, so we picked it up, and we bought it, and I put it on, and of course, I loved it. Now while of course it doesn't fit me to this day, I still have it in my room because stuff like that you never get rid of. I should say, when I discovered YouTube in 2008, it was a new thing for me still. Of course I watched nothing but Thomas videos, but in my early teens, heck, I may have been 12 at the time, I don't remember. However, I do remember curiosity killing the cat, so I looked up the ride, and sure enough, it was there, and it brought back some good memories. Well, with my history out of the way, what do I think of the ride? Well, as a Stitch fan, it is a good ride, but it could have been a lot better. But also, it could have been a lot worse. The ride cannot make sense at times. The ride having its lights out for most of the ride is not good for kids. And it would have been more fun to see Stitch a little more. Maybe have him interact with the audience a little bit, or just something like that. It would have been so cool to see more of Stitch's animatronic. And because it is Stitch, there should have been more, well, Stitch. I should say I'm also talking about the pre-show. Instead of a robot, it should have been Pleakley, or the ground councilwoman. I mean, a robot is a cool idea. It doesn't stand out. He does look a part of the Stitch world, but it would have been better if it fitted more. But it would have been better if it was someone from the actual movie. The same for Skippy. While it was cool he was there, it would have been cool to see the actual alien from the pre-show. I know they did it to cut costs, and because they didn't have a big budget, but it would have fit so much better if they made the alien from the pre-show. Again, Skippy is nice, but in my opinion, he doesn't fit the ride. It also would have been better if it worked more in the movie's canon, but it doesn't, and it really sucks. You could have done it, and it would have been really easy to do so, but no, they didn't do it. It would have been so cool to see, but oh well, what you get is what you get, and what we did get is okay. Not great, not terrible, just okay. With that said, I give Stitch's Great Escape a 6 out of 10. There are definitely flaws, and the ride could have been a lot better. but there are some really good stuff in my opinion. But I do have a soft spot for it. If I didn't ride it back in the day, I probably wouldn't care about the ride as much, even if Stitch wasn't in it. But because I did ride it, and it was my first ride I ever went on in my life, and because, yes, it has Stitch, my favorite Disney character of all time, I can't help but have a fondness for it. There are good things about it, there really are, just not as much as the bad things. But for what it's worth, I love it. It may not be great, but it has its pros. And as said in the movie, Ohana means family, and family means nobody gets left behind or forgotten. And while this ride may be left behind, it definitely won't be forgotten. At least I hope not, because some people really hate this ride. Like really, really hate this ride. I mean, come on guys, really? There are other worse rides to hate on, like...
Maka, maka.